What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Cultivating Conversations. I'm your host here, Farmer Jazz, bringing you straight up insights from innovators, entrepreneurs, and game changers out there making moves. But real quick, if you're loving the content, make sure you like, share, and hit the follow button. Your support helps keep these conversations cultivated. Now, let's get into today's episode. Welcome everybody to Cultivating Conversations. Today we have one of my favorite guys, Jesse Porter. Oh man, it's good to see you. Good to talk with you. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. I met Jesse a while back at a conference, man. He had the signature bow tie, and I think you were working on some LED lighting, or actually, it wasn't LED lighting. It was utilizing the sun through some type of
I think we met at the IES conference in San Diego where there were
yeah,
like
San Diego. Yep.
energy efficiency people there and cannabis
Yeah,
was creeping in. So like Fluence was there. I think I was there with Inspire talking
Inspire.
about
Yep.
HVAC. But we might have met on that Solitude tour where we went and got the little tour of Solitude and just
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I think
because
that's what
man,
it
there were
was.
some great conversations there about, just tech and where we're headed in cultivation in general.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know who you are, Jesse. So if you could do us a favor, give us a brief introduction on who you are and what you do.
I appreciate the opportunity, man. So, my name is Jesse Porter. I work for PIPP GrowGlide, racking company that also provides integrated airflow for cultivation, specifically cannabis, but we also take on other ag projects as well. I've been in the industry since 2004. I was going to school at Berkeley, and my mom got sick with cancer, and that sort of drove my passion to try and find a solution for her and her well being and utilizing medicine towards the end of her life. So I spent years in Oakland as a professor at Oaksterdam University. I ran dispensaries, I ran large scale cultivation facilities. I got a lot of experience along the way on cultivation and just the business as a whole. But that's one of the reasons I really try to help out everywhere I can. Right? My approach is to try and provide as much knowledge about cultivation as possible so people can make more informed decisions. Because on you know it's great to be able to provide medicine to people, and that's one of the main reasons cannabis exists as an opportunity in today's environment. But we've got to be able to make money, and we've got to be able to provide jobs and opportunities and careers. And I think that's what I'm most proud of is like I have this opportunity with PIP and GrowGlide, who also provides GGS and greenhouse solutions, to talk about cannabis all day, every day, and help people design better facilities that make them more money, and so they can give back to the community. I know historically we've had lots of conversations about you working in ag and how we can try and help people have better jobs, have longer careers, make more money in the industry. That's what I
Yeah,
like.
and it's like the integration. I like that you brought that out. It's like the integration of utilizing all this technology that we've developed for many different things that you never thought that you'd be able to use them for in agriculture, but it seems like it's making its way back, and especially with cannabis being one of the biggest industries in agriculture, um, just utilizing the technology to have repeatability, consistency, clean spaces, have the data there so that you can continue to keep pushing out high quality flower or whatever it is that you want. High quality flower, high quality. You want it to look good, whatever it is. You can get to those I guess you can get to those endpoints
Yeah, I think
by
it's
having the right KPIs.
yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? You look at some of the KPIs and metrics that cross over from cannabis and other agricultural endeavors. And it's really interesting to see what we can learn from one another, right? Margins are really tight in lettuce. So the investment in airflow is high because if those lettuce leaves get above 85 degrees, they're going to bolt, they're going to be bitter, you're going to have lost crop.
Yep.
So there's no fear outside of investing in that technology, controlling the airflow. And in cannabis, sort of the same way, right? Really understanding the velocities and leaf temperatures that we want and making the right decision on putting the whole symphony together of HVAC and air delivered to the space and then conditioned CO2 rich air delivered to the right places at the canopy. It's interesting, right? Like everyone has different red flags and different goals across the industry, but we can learn a lot about the technology that's applied to solve those solutions, whether it's leaf lettuce or basil or strawberry runnery, and what helps them make more consistent product. Like you said, consistency is king when you're talking about brands in this industry.
Definitely. And I remember when I first came into the industry, I had came in from building construction. I'm designing the indoor climate for human beings, and a lot of times we were utilizing a lot of the same systems, but we were forgetting we're not serving human beings. We're serving plants. So like the humidity was one of the things that we would always miss out on because we're like, yeah, this AC should be able to, well, the HVAC should be able to cool this space and control this space, but most HVACs that are for commercial spaces are serving dry air. And the plants kind of want a little bit of humidity, not the amount that we would want as human beings. So like going through the R&D and testing that out was like was kind of cool seeing the different things that I had learned from other spaces and was bringing them now into the agriculture space. And that's kind of the next question I want to ask because you seem like you've worn many hats in the ag space. And how have you put together the knowledge that you've learned from all these different places that you've worked, whether it be like a garden store or True Heritage or Inspire or Creeds, and bringing that together to do what you're doing now?
That's, dude, loaded question. I love it.
That's a-
No, to me, like it started with a mop, right? Like, what's the most basic level entry position I can get to support a cultivation facility? And then it became about learning and taking on these opportunities and filling gaps in my knowledge. But the real thing that drove me was answering the question of why. Not just do this because I said so, but do this because it optimizes root production. It helps
Yep.
the curing of the product. It helps the SOPs for trimming, like whatever it is, like try and learn all those things. And you learn places where you have better perspective or more powerful experiences to influence decision making, but also why all these things are connected, why taking care of mother plants and spraying them are so important, so they're appropriately prepared for cloning and shorten that stage, and you have healthy veg to have the healthy flower, right? Understanding how all those things are connected, and sort of brings me back to what you said about HVAC, right? Like that was a big gap in my knowledge that I didn't really understand this box very well. And over the years, I've come to learn a lot more about thermodynamics and psychrometrics and computational fluid dynamics and how to apply all this science. Um, but a lot of it is where I'm at now in selling racking. I get to help provide the information that's so critical to make an important HVAC decision, right? Like there's more and more experience in HVAC and controls and how to really get the most out of these systems for cultivation. But the inputs are important, right? So
Yeah.
from a racking perspective, I have a room and I design the racks in there. We lay out single tier, two tier, three tier veg, airflow, whatever it is. Now we know how many lights we need. Now we know the total canopy per room. And with that information, we can feed that to a really qualified engineer to help us make a HVAC decision that's appropriately sized. So for me, providing an HVAC solution that was purpose built for cannabis taught me a lot about making sure that there were accurate inputs with total canopy numbers and fertigation schedules and things like that. So that's why I'm where I'm at now, is really exploring different opportunities in rooms that allow us to, like I said before, sort of put the symphony together, make sure we get the right lights with the right tier spacing, with the right total canopy, and be able to serve that room so they're viable. Instead of putting out fires every day, you're
Yeah.
figuring out, you know.
Yeah, and that's part of the scene that I really enjoy about ag was just getting the opportunity to work with many different, whether it was a racking system, lighting system, that whole R&D process was just like really exciting for me because it's just like you're learning something every single round. Your plants might not be like how you want them to be every single time, but you're learning one thing that you can like go and tune that and now start it over with the fine-tuned system, then run it again, and eventually you get to a nice finished product, and then you like to keep testing that to make sure that you have the repeatability. So you had spoke about the racking system and the company you work for. Can you explain a little bit more about what you do there and what that's all about?
Yeah, so I'm the director of cultivation and content at GrowGlide, which is a company underneath the PIPP umbrella, which also allows us to provide greenhouse, single tier, multi tier, fully mobile, stationary racks, and a variety of different airflow solutions, top down, bottom up. Um, and as a result, it becomes a real challenge in taking in all the information from these customers and making sure we find the right solution rather than just saying, hey, here's your rack, here's some fans, go figure it out. It's really about understanding the length of their run and how big their plants are going to be and what size lights they're going to put in there and how much airflow we need to add and sort of building out each one custom. So that's really what I do is I go around and I talk to people about the value proposition of fully mobile racks as a cultivator. You know, you gotta figure out how to get as much canopy into a room as possible while still making it functional with compliant mobile aisles and spacing and interstitial space for airflow and whatnot. So with those challenges in mind, I like to take my 20 years of experience and sort of say, hey, wow, this is a fantastic space. Here's your opportunity. Here's how much power you got. Let's figure out what you're really going to do with this. And sometimes it's phasing, a couple rooms at a time over a period. Sometimes it's a bigger build out. Sometimes it's single tier, adding a second tier later. But talking to them about what that looks like over a year or a couple of years allows me to build these long-term relationships. And I'm proud of that. I think it's a lot of fun to be able to look people in the eye and say, hey, I gave you the best possible advice at this moment right now in regards to your racking, and then how that, ripple effect affects lighting and HVAC and your whole facility design, like you said, even down to construction.
Nice, and I like how you mentioned all the things that you guys offer, but you don't just like throw it at someone like an IKEA box and like here's some instructions on how to put together. Because I feel like that's a lot that's where a lot of mistakes are made because you're just assuming that this individual knows how to use this technology properly. And one thing that I learned that was always key with no matter what we were designing were SOPs. Like the way that things look might change, but those SOPs really aren't changing much. And that's where the repeatability comes from. That's where the consistency and your plant development comes from. So do you see that in the field too? Because you're on the West Coast and you're in Texas and maybe it looks a little different.
Yeah, there's definitely some differences, but you mentioned something earlier that I think was pretty poignant and applies to these SOPs that we're talking about developing for optimal performance, right? Is the data and collecting that data. Before legalization, before the 2018 Farm Act, like there weren't as many people growing. And those people that did grow had sort of the secret sauce, or maybe they didn't even fully understand the why of what they were doing. They were just following a label or following a homie's recommendation, right? So with the data, we're able to plot all this information. We're able to take it in and say, what if we changed REC on this? What if we changed the pH on this? What if we changed the temperature, the humidity, the amount of air? What would that do to the end performance of this plant or our SOPs relative to defoliation or harvest or whatever it might be? So collecting all that data has really transformed the industry. Instead of secret sauces where someone whispers the answer to you, it's on the board how to do everything. And there's videos behind how to do, defoliation, what the fertigation needs to look like, what the expected runoff measurements will be. And then that allows people to scale. It allows people to train on how to use these systems. And I think that's where we're at in today's cultivation environment, especially in cannabis, is that people got in being a master grower saying, I can grow cannabis, trust me. And now it is people that are, directors of agriculture, that their main job is making sure the HVAC's running right, that the right velocities are coming out of the fans and the tubes, that we're meeting the cycle times on, load in and cloning and whatnot. So they have to look at the SOPs, measure the SOPs, and then change them when appropriate, right?
Yeah.
This one's got to be a little different because X, Y, and Z. We're adapting to this. We're adopting this new thing, and that's how they stay nimble. But the data is critical for SOP creation and augmentation, and it's critical for careers, right? Like, how do you have a career in the cultivation industry if you don't know how to execute these SOPs and learn different SOPs? So that's part of it. It's a huge part of it.
Yeah, and oh man, I got so many questions I want to ask you about what's going on. But one of the things that as I was going through my notes, I just seen that you had a lot of experience in many different places. And I know for me personally, when my mentors or even friends had looked at my career course over the time, they're like, "Oh, it doesn't seem like anything you're doing is making sense. Like you're not adding up." It's like you're working in project management on buildings. Now you're doing indoor greenhouses. Then you got your own outdoor hemp farm, and then you're in cannabis, and it's just like, how did all that stuff come together? Um, and I see a lot of similarities in when I look at your with your resume. To me, it doesn't look scattered. It looks very methodical. It seems like you got to one place, you learned as much as you could. That's kind of like what I seen with like the grow shop. It's like you this is a passion for you. So like you're gonna be passionate about selling things. The people that come in growing, you're giving them knowledge, but eventually you hit a point where it's just like, all right, I want to learn something else and I want to serve a new client base. So let me move up to the next level. Am I on to something there, or or is was there a little something else going on?
I think I appreciate you saying it's not scattered because it does feel sort of scattered sometimes, right? Like when I was in college, I took a job scooping gelato, as a part-time job because it's flexible hours. And I worked my way up to director of operations and learned a lot about consumer packaged goods, distribution of frozen, the distribution channel, like just how you play that game. And it primed me for going into the cannabis industry when I graduated and became, member of this community full time. And, it flanked a lot of the decisions I made, tried to be a lot more professional about the growth of businesses and distribution. But then it also led me to be like, man, like I've learned a lot from the people around me. How do I give back? I'm going to open a hydro shop. I'm going to be open 7 days and I'm going to talk to people about whatever they want and challenge them. Like, bring in your problems, bring in a leaf in a bag. I'll put it under the microscope. And I think that challenge really helped me step my game up and trying to solve problems, help large scale cultivators solve very sticky problems was wonderful because it put me out of my comfort zone, made me really do some research and look at the technology available in the space and technology outside of the space and see how to apply it. So that's why it seems like it goes a lot of different ways. But as the cannabis industry is evolving, like 2005, there was no cannabis industry career. You couldn't be like, hey, I'm going to sign up for a 20-year career as a director of operations of cultivation facility. Like, sort of a hoop.
People looking at you crazy.
So like staying nimble, chasing my passions, really trying to fall in line with if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability and learn as much as I can about it so I can help people, right? It's not about selling people as much as it is exposing people to solutions so they can put it together. Because in the end, they got to run it, right? And those different experiences that I've had over my career have taught me a lot about how to run it, like seed company, clone company, large scale flower. These businesses taught me a lot about the price of bad decisions and bad SOPs and the
Yeah.
benefits of fine tuning and tracking those things.
Yeah, and I like that you brought out the seed company and the clone company because that's where I want to go next. um, so could you talk about your experience with the seed company to start and kind of why seed and clones are like necessary to the market?
Yeah, I think that from a cloning perspective, right, people want to have a predictable outcome. So going and picking up fresh, clean genetics and plugging them into your room and taking advantage of them is a great way to grow grade A flower. If you want something that's more proprietary to you, something that you hand selected, buy some beans, get some seeds and pop them. Even if they're F1s or not feminine, whatever it is, like you have this opportunity to, through hundreds or thousands of seeds that you pop, choose something that represents your brand. So I really like breeding seeds because I like a lot of the old school stuff. And as much as I appreciate a 30% THC flower, like, I'll smoke whatever's good and fresh and clean. So for me, it's like, oh, so I miss some of those flavors. I miss some of those differential highs. I miss some of that entourage effect of like the old school Panama Reds and Colombians and stuff like that that no one really grows anymore because they're not as financially viable. So for me, I've got a 10-acre farm in Northern California, got a guy living up there that's been a seed breeder for, more than 40 years. And he's got a lot of old school genetics. So as sad as it is to have this vault hidden away in the mountains, the truth is that I never want to lose those things. And I always like cultivating cannabis for myself. So it became a selfish endeavor where people were like, well, I want to buy those seeds. And it's like, okay, like how do we effectively distribute these? And a lot of it was influenced by the cloning that we did, because in our clone business, all we did was pop seeds and find moms. Like we would never go get a genetic from someone else and then clone on it. So we always thought we had a really healthy stock. We always had that initial seed stock. We could breed against it if we really wanted to. And everyone's got a different approach, but for me, it's like clones are consistent, get you up and running, especially if you do them in house and you can do them clean and healthy. Then there's seeds, which is more of a long-term investment that allows your brand to get market differentiation because you have something, other than the classic cookies, other than what's hot right now.
Yeah.
So that brings a lot of traffic in. But then we're not even talking about tissue culture, which is
Yeah.
another approach that people are taking in the market. So you get this cleaner genetic, you wake it up in-house and you grow it up, and theoretically it should be a lot stronger and better and more resilient. So lots of different opportunities to get genetics into the space.
Yeah.
Seed breeding is the most fun because you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that you brought that up because I actually got into the clone and tissue culture scene working with Philos,
Okay.
Philos out of Sacramento.
Yeah.
We were actually working with them at Crop One and developing some racking systems for them to start up some of their tissue culture facilities. And I had never known about tissue culture. I was like, you're basically running science with this science experience on cannabis. Like this is crazy. But it was like, I mean, me personally, I just like to learn. So like, if it's something new, I'm gonna put myself in the space and I'll sit there like a fly on the wall and just consume. Because eventually, I'm gonna hear something I like. Eventually, and that's one of the things that I liked working with a company like Philos. There was just like so many different types of strains that they were working with. So it's just like when they were bringing it together with the tissue culture business that they were running, Conception Nurseries, I was just like, wow, there's a lot that can be done here because they're utilizing some of our lettuce techniques with cannabis and making a different type of lettuce, and it was really cool. But one of the things that I do like is you're staying creative. You got the bow tie, you could see the
Mhm.
background, and it keeps the creative side where you can basically, with the knowledge that you have now, you can find those strains that you enjoyed from the past and maybe turn them into hybrids. Do you do that at all in California?
Yeah, I mean, we do some hybrid creation. We do some inbred line stuff to keep stuff clean. And really, we're, breed for health and what we enjoy and try and keep it less muddy as possible. But it's interesting, right? Genetics is such an interesting element, as you know. It's like, it impacts your market share, it impacts your brand, it impacts your yield, it impacts the quality in the COAs. So it can be like a tricky proposition. But like you said, uh, finding the right genetics, finding a consistent supplier, having that fit into the SOP that makes sense and makes money and is profitable is really the most important thing. And you mentioned, like, we were just talking about this winding river of a resume, and it's like that's why you get exposed to tissue culture for a year, and you're like, wow, like I want to learn more about this. How do I do meristem extraction? Like, how do I need to go buy a hood? Like, you
Yeah.
start going down this rabbit hole and you learn a ton. And whether that's a good decision or a bad decision financially, or when to use it and when not to use it, and you put that in your pocket. And you continue to grow as a cultivator and as a business person and as a makeshift engineer. And then you apply that knowledge when it's appropriate, to help everybody out. That's it's pretty cool.
Yeah, one of the things that I realized with the jobs I was taking on as I traveled, the industry looked totally different in different areas. And I know you're coming from California, going to Texas. Texas isn't as friendly with the cannabis as it is in California. So can you walk us through like how your journey has been moving to Texas with and being in the cannabis space?
Yeah, I was a little nervous, right, as a California kid. Like, there's so much opportunity. But then I realized I was getting old and really starting to assess the future markets of America. And I believe that we'll federally legalize at some point, which will put Texas in a really beneficial position from a distribution perspective. So initially, that's sort of what I thought. It was like, hey, it's a long-term play. Texas is well positioned. It's a big state with a big consumer base. We'll see how it goes. And then I got down here and I was looking for events and ways to be a part of the community. I joined the Texas Hemp Coalition. I started to hear that voice and understand the bigger movement. And then, honestly, I heard of this event called the Texas Cannabis Roundup, and it was like a couple months after I just moved to Texas, and it's like 20 minutes from my house. So I drove to Dallas. I hung out at this event, and I thought, man, that's pretty cool. There's a lot of people involved in this hemp movement out of Texas to effectively can create these amazing brands that are globally viable, that are shipping across the nation. And then last year, I just went back again, and the growth was like 10x. There are so many more people cultivating, fire hemp, in Texas, isolates, gummies, ice cream, drinks. The scene is expanding rapidly, and people are taking advantage of the opportunity to cultivate hemp and transform it into consumer packaged goods or sell it as viable flour.
Yeah,
Um, so it's not what I thought, right? And it took me like a year to really digest it and get a better idea of Texas. But yeah, there's great cannabis in Texas, and it's not that hard to find or that hard to get. You just
that's
have
good to hear. That's good to hear because that's kind of it's much similar to like my journey. Like most of my learning had came from being in California when it came to cannabis and working in California. And then as things opened up on the East Coast, it kind of seemed like it was just a copy and paste of California. So I was just like, and the people are meeting, they were like, "Oh, I'm from California." I'm from California. I was like, "Oh, Colorado or Oregon." And I was just like, "Oh, so it's basically the West Coast." But then I got the opportunity to work with a hemp company, and we actually started a farm in Iowa. And going to Iowa and working with hemp to start was kind of like my way to test out the cannabis industry. And what I started to realize, well, for me personally, is that I feel like the hemp scene is really underrated because I grew for what was it, hemp hearts, which is like basically a protein supplement. But it tastes really good. I've never had hemp hearts before then, but it was just like, what can I grow where I'm not as focused on the flower, I'm just focused on the seed. Like as long as I can grow this plant to its full maturity, I know I can get some seeds out of it. So like I started with something easy. And what was easy was really in abundance. I was just like, wow, I got a bunch of seeds. We rolled out a whole line of the hemp parts and was selling it in New York, and it was really a big success. But in the selling of the hemp parts, I started to see the whole market of hemp. I've seen the tinctures, I've seen the gummies, I've seen the Delta 8 starting to come up. I've seen the flour, um, topicals. It was just there was just so much more. And then I started to learn about, the endocannabinoid system and how it works with the endocannabinoid system and learning about the differences between CBD and THC. And for me, coming from an athletic background, I was just like, wow, this is what I needed at this point because I grew up playing sports, playing football, running track, and a bunch of basketball. So my knees are not what they used to be, and dealing with that pain consistently led me to popping ibuprofens, Tylenols after working out, and I was just like eventually got like heartburn symptoms. And I was just like, yeah, there's no way I can continue to keep doing this. I have to try something out. And during that time was when I started to sample some of the CBDs, the full spectrums. And I was just like, I could do this every day. I drink my tea, and that's like something I could just throw inside my tea every single day. I usually have like 2 cups, so and that helps with my inflammation. And then during that, I learned about so many other things that people are using CBD for. And this is before we're not even talking about any THC at this moment. And I'm
sure.
just like, these are all the products. Like there was a guy who made mocktails out of the hemp. And I was just like, this I think people are missing out on the hemp because because they're too infatuated or in the and they're too infatuated with the THC and not seeing that this is something that you can kind of combine the two. Like whatever you're doing with THC, you can also do with the CBD. And I personally think the CBD has more benefits to bring to the table than the THC. What do you think about that?
I am just so happy that we're in a place where we're talking about other secondary metabolites, right? On
Yeah,
a podcast where it's like, you know, it's easy to make a decision, a buying decision on high THC. You feel safe, you feel like you're going to get high, and that's the goal. But then when you start to really look for medical viability, you're looking at, you know, different cannabinoids, terpenes, all in proportion to each other and how they impact your system. So I think it's great because when my mom was sick with cancer, there was no talk about these secondary metabolites or CBD or CBG or CBN. There was none of that, right? I mean, maybe in some of the medical journals, but from our perspective, like you're not going to be able to go out and find, type 3 or type, 4 hemp to smoke,
yeah,
get you that medical viability. So it's really cool to see all these different opportunities for different proportions and ratios into the consumer packaged goods environment where people that are sick can go out and find something that effectively helps them cope with whatever they're dealing with, right? And enough diversity for them to explore that, all these different ratios. But I do think that one thing is common across the board. THC, terpenes, secondary metabolites across the board is quality in, quality out, right? The better hemp hearts you grow, the more valuable they are to the market, to the consumer, the higher nutritional rate, the better they are as cattle feed. All these things go up, the higher quality. Indoor flower, we all know that story. Hemp, same thing. The better hemp you grow, the higher extract ratio you're going to get, and it's going to have a higher margin and be more profitable. But also that end product's going to be better and
yeah.
full spectrum, and Jared's going to enjoy using it even more in his morning tea. So I think that sort of brings it all together. It's like, hey, that focus on quality, and that's where we're heading. All this knowledge and technology applied to the space, hemp included, is allowing us to get better ins, to get better outs, to create all these other products like you talked about. It's crazy. Like you go around Texas and you go to a local vape shop and you can get all kinds of drinks and edibles that will effectively, help you self-medicate.
Yeah, and that's kind of my granddad was dealing with a lot of issues during the pandemic, and I got the opportunity to utilize some of these hemp products. He was dealing with a lot of swelling in his ankles, a lot of inflammation in his body. The first, and my granddad was a former pastor too, so like trying to get him on anything cannabis was a tough sell.
Sure.
So I started with the topicals, and I brought him the topicals. For him to have rubbed on his feet and everything. And like the next week, he was like, "Oh man, this is working. You got any more of that?" I was like, "All right, let me let me show you what else I have in my bag." So I was like, "I got these tinctures." So I showed him the tinctures. He drinks coffee, so I was just like, "Just throw a couple of drops into your coffee in the morning, a couple drops in the afternoon." And then like he's like, "Oh, this stuff really works. This stuff really works." And like, and I'm like, "Yeah, grandpa, this is cannabis." And then I showed him the hemp parts I had made because he was a really big peanut fan. So like I'm like, everything that you do with peanuts, you could do with these. And I personally think they taste better and you should try it out. So like he had the hemp parts, he had the tinctures, he had the topicals, and he was a fan. He was a fan, and I got him to become a fan not by selling him a dream or telling him anything was gonna happen. I was like, I use this. This is
Right.
what I use. I'm in good shape. This is what I use for my protein. I got rid of the whey, started using the seeds. That's what I use now, and it works for me. I also got rid of the Tylenol and the ibuprofen, and I use these tinctures now. And it's just like it was easier for me to sell that and also sell the actual healing in it because I'm a product of it. And then also I could show you the products I use, and then I also can show you where you can go to find products that you might like because you might not like the tinctures. You might like an edible or two, like just pop an edible. That's your thing. You might just want the topicals because
Yeah.
like hey, that works for you. You're looking for a solution. There it is. And that's one of the things that I do like about the hemp scene. It's like popping up everywhere. It's now you can go to a Macy's, TJ Maxx, and you're definitely going to see a hemp shampoo or a hemp lotion in there. And I'm just happy to see that.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, man. Like, there's this huge growing consumer market that wants to be satisfied with the hemp product. So back to what we talked about earlier, like, wow, quality and consistency drive the production of all these hemp products or medical applications or even smokable hemp flower. So you see these people taking advantage of this opportunity to ship across state lines with hemp products and manufacture it at scale. First step at scale is like, all right, let's go big outside, but then pests, pathogens, challenges to manage, one crop a year. You start to do the numbers and you realize, oh, maybe we should also have an indoor multi-tier where we're running smaller plants, 5.5, 6 pulls a year of hemp, right? Of hemp hearts. Maybe not of fiber necessarily, as a field crop's much easier to process without degradation of fiber. But the same concept, right? Of like, we have this high quality, value add that is outside of the commodity base where there's a big margin. So producing it inside at relatively large enough scale to be able to meet that market demand is a great opportunity for so many people getting into the hemp industry. Lower barriers to entry, lower cost to entry. And if you build a good facility, whether it's a cultivation facility or a manufacturing facility or a packaging facility, there's opportunities to put these brands, to help these brands expand their footprint across the nation. So now instead of just like thinking, oh, I'm going to make gummies in Texas and people in San Antonio are going to love them, it's like, well, all of Texas and all of every other state, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kentucky, they can all carry them. Like you said, you go into these different stores and see all these different products, which is exactly why there's this opportunity of like, ooh, we need to manufacture more hemp. We need to cultivate more hemp as a nation, indoor, outdoor, all of these things. They're going to help our planet, but they're also going to create jobs and
Yes.
help people medicate.
Definitely. I think that there's so many jobs to be created in the space because even with my outdoor farm that we had in Iowa, like we left a lot of the fibers on the ground to rot and just add more nitrogen back into the soil and such. But we missed out on the opportunity to help out like some of these guys that are out here. Like I know I had one guy I interviewed recently, Harry Hemp, where he's taken a lot of the hemp fibers and turning it into like a hemp lime and using that for construction. And there's so many benefits with that just alone. A lot of the things that we see as waste, and one person's waste is another person's gold. And even in the hemp space where you could be growing for a flower, or as I was growing for the seed, I'm just worried about basically the top part of the plant, but the whole plant itself can provide another product to someone else. And then that I think is the lane that can be filled in this industry. Is more collaboration, just as you're doing in Texas, finding individuals so that if you do have a grow, like you don't let anything go to waste because there's someone that'll come take that and make some use of it.
Yeah, I think the common analogy is right, like the Native American tribes member utilizing the whole buffalo, right? Like every piece of that animal should go to some sort of use, and a use could be adding it back to the soil for recycling nutrients and lowering your fertigation investment over the course of years. But I think that's really what holds true for every commercial ag facility, whether it's cannabis or a strawberry runnery, right? Operational efficiency. Waste costs money, waste takes time, and waste is a source of pathogens. So reducing waste to the minimal amount allows you to run a more operationally efficient venture and cultivation facility. So figuring out what SOPs, like we said before, and what data backs that up to make those decisions is really critical. And reducing waste, will reduce the cost to produce every pound of cannabis that you ever grow, or every pound of strawberries, or whatever it might be. And I think that's important, right? Like when we design these facilities and we think about utilizing all the things that we create, the less wasteful we are, the more money we make. So that satisfies the CFO, CEO side. And then the less waste we have, the less pathogen threats and work that we have. So the cultivator's like, that's great too. Like this is a win for everybody.
Yeah,
Uh,
win-win.
yeah.
So I see. Well, of course, from the conversation so far, you guys can see that Jesse has a lot of information and knowledge on the topic, and I see from just from my notes, you've done a lot of teaching yourself and speaking at various events. Could you talk about some of the webinars and some of the teaching you've done in the space?
Yeah, man. Thanks. I got to speak at Hawking State College one time and teach like an ad lib class about cannabis cultivation. It was so cool, man. It was like one of the highlights because all these young college kids that were looking for careers in cannabis, and to give my perspective on like career mentorship and what it takes and what steps you might want to invest in, and then skills to invest in, and also just best practices. So sharing the resources available to our community, like RII's best practices guide for cultivating cannabis, or just saying like, hey, reach out to these solution providers, right? If you want to learn more about lighting, reach out to a lighting manufacturer. If you want to learn more about HVAC, reach out to an HVAC manufacturer, and you can learn about their solution and how it's applied to this space. So anyway, that was a really fun experience, but I do really like going to these trade shows. Sometimes the rooms aren't jam packed, sometimes they are. But what I always find is that I try to present on topics where there's nuggets of gold in there that can be explored further after the conversation. So one of my favorite decks is, operational efficiency KPIs for cannabis facilities. We talk about measuring yield and quantifying power use and things like that. And then airflow crop steering is another one. And think what you want about crop steering and being a buzzword. The reality is as technology advances and we get more controls of fans and we have more precise goals in line throughout the stages of growth, we can manipulate them and impact the drybacks, impact fertigation uptake, impact leaf temperature, and change the way we run our HVAC system to be even more efficient. There's all these applications that really take more of a customizable dive in with the people that are building them. But broadcasting them out there really helps me access those people. It's like, oh, I got a buddy who's really concerned about, too much air in his space. And we talk about what the downside is, stomatal closure and plant stress and leaves drying out, and how we would measure that and what tools we need, a hot wire anemometer, like what we're going to do to modulate after we install the airflow solution. So there's a lot of different veins I like to go down, but KPIs and metrics, and then really understanding operational efficiency and the application of these tools tends to be more general in my presentations. And then afterwards, I take these longer, deeper dives into real facilities with real square footages and real limitations on power and supply return. And that becomes really fun because I, got to think fast and hard and work with these people to come up with, custom solutions versus, like you said, the generic check of the box.
Yeah. And with teaching to like basically the future of the industry, what are some of the things that you see that they're reaching out for, the information that they're looking for, or the spaces that they're trying to get into?
Yeah, I would say a lot of people say like, hey, how do I get a job in the cannabis industry? And I usually say, like I said before, grab a mop, like be a janitor and understand the importance of cleanliness. And that'll create more opportunities within a facility for you. But now courses are being offered at college so people can come out of university specializing in engineering for cannabis, in agribusiness for cannabis, in fertigation for cannabis. So it's great to see this younger generation come in and apply what they've learned in college. But I always stress like it is still a business, and just because you learn something in college doesn't always make it as viable in the business setting. Back to the data, right? So what I usually say is like, look at the data because we have changed how we cultivate so much, even in the past 10 years, even 5 years, right? That is someone coming into the industry, see where the trends are, see what kind of conditions people are running, see what kind of technology is being utilized successfully by businesses that are scaling. And then you'll start to see these bigger trends of like, oh, hey, this is a better way to design a facility, or this is a better way to run a team, or this is a better way to brand your cannabis. and that'll help you figure out where you fit in. But there's so
Yeah,
much to learn still, man. So much.
I like how you brought in one, the data, and then the subtle pickup of mop. Cleanliness inside of a growing space is A1. Like if you don't have a clean place where you're growing, I'm just gonna assume that a lot of your crops is dirty. I haven't met many people that don't keep at least, if even if it's just a tent, that
Sure.
tent's gonna be one of the cleanest places ever, and they're gonna make sure you don't go inside that tent with any dirt, because they
Right.
know how you could just bring something in off of your clothes, off your hands, off out of your hair. They're very very aware of all the pests that can be brought in. And when you're using that mop and you're seeing the level of cleanliness that you need for that space, you're actually learning. You're learning about like the first step, which is a lot of that was it PP, and learning why you need that. Like that's one of the things I learned when I was at Crop One, because I'm like, these guys going inside the enclosure with lab coats and gloves, and we're spraying alcohol on our feet before we go inside, and we're changing our shoes, no outdoor shoes. I'm just like, these are plants, they're outdoors. Like we
Right.
should. Why are we treating indoors cleaner than outdoors? But then you realize it's not. It's the fact of you are, by being so clean, you are eliminating, the need for pesticides in some fashions. You're eliminating the need to search for certain pests, because you've gone the right route to remove as much as possible, so that inside that enclosure all you got to really worry about is the systems. And then you do like spot checks here and there. And that takes away so much, so much. Because when you're growing outdoors, like animals are eating your plants, the pests are eating your plants. You
Sure.
might not get any sun, you might not get any rain. Like, there
Right.
could be like so many things that are affecting your plant. But when you're indoors, it's so tight that if there's a problem, you kind of know someone brought it in. Like,
Sure.
someone brought it in some way, whether it was through the nutrients, through their clothes, or or without proper washing. So like, I like how you like slid that be a janitor thing in there, but I don't think people really understand the janitor is the guy that's keeping things like super clean, and they can serve multiple roles at facilities.
Yeah, it's like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And
Yep.
the joke is even funnier here when we're talking about pounds of cannabis. But the reality is like once you have worked in a facility and watched $1 million worth of crops go down the drain, or 500,000, right, a couple of rooms, or whatever it is, and you trace it back to whatever you trace it back to, you start taking the preventative nature seriously, right? Like the way people check in and gown up and spray alcohol or step what they step in, the way you regularly maintain your HVAC. If you go down for Pythium or Fusarium and you find it in the drain pan, you're like, why are we not cleaning this regularly? That regular cleaning prevents the pathogen pressure from building up so much that it negatively impacts your cultivation facility. There's always going to be pest pressures, pathogen pressures, right? But sometimes those little things you do that are a pain in everyone's butt really do eliminate the bigger threat of a whole crop going down. And when you start to see those little threats, they're much more controllable because you already have those fail safes in place. And you just restore faith in the SOP, and
Yep.
then you get back to a place where you can, run the facility versus worrying about Jared bringing in aspergillus all over his feet.
I know. Or some aphids.
Yeah, you got to grow your own, and you're bringing in whatever pest you got.
Yep. Yep. So one of the things I want to ask, what are some of the challenges you've seen in the industry? As someone who's had a lot of experience, what are some of the challenges you're seeing in the current industry, or some of the ones that you've seen in the past, and some of the solutions that you've come up with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like, there are a lot of nuances to take into account when you design a cultivation facility. So taking advantage of every dollar that you spend to make sure it's invested wisely is a real challenge because money is tight, especially in the cannabis industry, right? It's hard to borrow, it's hard to get money, it's hard to write stuff off. So you have to be really efficient with your financial investment and think about what it is long term. So for me, it's about understanding the goals of the customer, the goals of the cultivator, the goals of the friend. Like, what are you really trying to achieve? Is it an exit strategy? Is it an increase in yield? Is it building a facility that you can manage with the least amount of people for the next 15 years? All these different avenues exist, but it's important to make the right steps along the way to facilitate the success of each one of those endeavors. So really understanding what the goals are, right? What the phases are. We're going to do cultivation, we're going to do extraction, then we're going to do consumer packaged goods. And what does that look like? What machines and equipment do we need? How are we going to scale our staff? What does distribution of that look like? What are the KPIs for success that trigger the investment in those expanses? Or did we fall short? And do we need to take capital to retrofit, to change some of the decisions that we made, to add more HVAC, to add more airflow? To potentially scale in a different way. I think one of the biggest challenges in indoor cannabis cultivation right now is really understanding how to optimize a multi-tier setup, right? We talked about that a little bit offline.